Apocalypse. I'm Gary Machuda. Recently, there was a video that was put out by Wesley Huff having Dr. John Meade on his program to kind of help him out of hot water because he misspoke and mischaracterized the Isaiah scroll at Qumran. And in the process, and this is the only reason I'm commenting on it, because we all make mistakes, including myself. And so that's fine. But the reason we're looking at this is because both of them throw Dr. Norm Geisler under the bus. And you know what? I have to say congratulations to you that you had the integrity to call out this evangelical scholar that's been putting out garbage on the Protestant canon. So all I have to say to them is welcome to the party, better late than never, because here on the Apocrypha Apocalypse, we exposed Geisler and all his problems way back in 2021. So we're going to take a look at the clips from that program where they throw Geisler under the bus, and we're going to take a trip to yesteryear, way back when we uncovered this. And that's one of the benefits, folks, of watching this channel. You are way ahead of the curve on a lot of the shenanigans that goes on with apologetics on the Protestant canon. So fasten your seatbelts, folks, because the Apocrypha Apocalypse begins. As I said at the beginning, this is a real treat for me. As you know, Wesley Huff was on the Joe Rogan program, and there was a question on the Isaiah scroll of Qumran. And Wesley kind of wasn't terribly accurate in his description of the fidelity of the Isaiah scroll to the Proto-Masoretic text. He basically said that they're identical when they're not. Okay, but they're virtually identical, as he points out later in the program. So he brings on Dr. John Meade to clarify what exactly is the Isaiah scroll, how does this square with the Proto-Masoretic text, in what way can we say that they compare, and kind of help him a little bit out in terms of rolling back a few of the overstatements he made on the Rogan program. In the process, though, fascinating enough, Dr. John Meade throws in this idea of antiquated information that has been held on too long within Protestant apologetics. And in the process, he throws, you guessed it, Norm Geisler under the bus. Now, this is delightful because for years, I've been shouting as much as I can. We've put out programs here on the Apocrypha Apocalypse showing how Geisler is terrible in his apologetics, that he's bases his arguments on antiquated information, and he misuses sources, including antiquated sources, in that misinformation. So let's look and see what John Meade has to say about Norm Geisler's work in terms of the Qumran.
Now, here's an area, Wes, and I hope I'm not going to step on any toes, but apologists kind of latched on to that early on. They latched on to that datum, and they did two things with it. One, they didn't revise it when more Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the 1950s out of Cave 4. So I could pick on Norman Geisler here for a second. His description of the Dead Sea Scrolls doesn't really update with his Bible handbook, okay, on this matter. I wish he had done that, but he didn't. And I've kind of tracked it, actually. His book is the source of lots of misinformation on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So he didn't update the evidence as more and more discoveries happened. And he didn't really track with later and subsequent research on the earliest pieces, like the Great Isaiah Scroll or 1Q Isaiah A. So apologists, right, are going to do most help, and you know this, they're going to do most help for the kingdom as they continue to track with scholarship on these big questions, and then speak to what the evidence teaches and doesn't teach us, and that sort of thing. Little sidebar over.
So yes, Dr. Geisler is under the bus now, and in defense of Wesley Huff's misstatements, he finally is exposed for the terrible stuff they put out. Now, the thing about Geisler is he was around long enough, and he had enough street cred for Protestant evangelicals and fundamentalists that it's used everywhere. If you go on the internet and you look up typical defenses for the Protestant canon, many times you'll have people who copy and paste Norm Geisler's stuff on the canon, just uncritically accepting everything he says. And it just gets reused and reused. And like I said, what Geisler says simply doesn't cut mustard. Now, at the end of the program, Wesley Huff comes and you guessed it, once again, throws Dr. Norman Geisler under the bus. So let's watch that clip.
Are ways that even in my own world of Christian apologetics, there has been generalizations that have been unhelpful and that need to be taken account for in groups like, Norman Geisler, who has now passed away, but was not a biblical scholar. It was a very good and competent philosopher, but definitely had some blind spots in terms of his biblical scholarship in that regard. And so there are ways that we can build on that as individuals involved in biblical scholarship and as myself involved in Christian apologetics, trying to make sure that we are doing our due diligence.
So it takes this kind of fairly big scandal, if you want to call it a scandal. I mean, Wesley just basically misspoke, and we're all human. We all misspeak. If you watch this channel, every program I misspeak, right? So I'm giving him credit. It's a shame that he has to defend himself like he does, but the reason he has to do it is because of people like Norm Geisler and the state of evangelical apologetics in general. Is that they make these mischaracterizations a lot. They use bad info and they throw it out there like it's fact. So he did a very human thing, and kind of like what he says, it's out there, right? And apologists need to update their stuff, and that's especially true in the area of canon. In fact, I would even say, from what I heard about Huff and Meade on the canon, I think they need a lot of adjustment as well too. But like I said, they're late to the party, so it's good they're at the party. It's just bad that it took them so long to actually expose this stuff. Unless they've done it before, I haven't heard it. So I just want to share that with you, because way back in August of 2021, I did a couple of programs where I exposed Norm Geisler's treatment of the Dead Sea Scrolls in regards to the Deuterocanon. Now, just to refresh your memory, it's a great program. So please, it's great not because I did it. It's great because it gives you all the information that you need. So I'm not patting myself on the back. I really want you to check it out. And you can really see what I mean by blatant dishonesty with the sources. So anyway, here is a quote. This is from my Logos version of Baker Encyclopedia of Christian Apologetics, put out by Norm Geisler. And it's, in fact, this whole section here I've seen reprinted again and again on websites illegally. But here's this section on the apocryphal writings at Qumran. I just want to show you, just to give you an idea of what my programs went into. So it says, quote, and by the way, let me give you the page number because I want to use this as fair use. This is page 31 of the Baker Encyclopedia of Christian Apologetics. It says, quote, apocryphal writings at Qumran, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran include not only the community's Bible, the Old Testament, but their library with fragments of hundreds of books. Among these were some Old Testament apocryphal books. The fact that no commentaries were found for the apocryphal books and only canonical books were found in the special parchment and script indicates that the apocryphal books were not viewed as canonical by the Qumran community. Menahem Mensur lists the following fragments of Apocrypha and pseudepigraphical Tobit in Hebrew and Aramaic, Enoch in Aramaic, Jubilees in Hebrew, Testament of Levi and Naphtali in Aramaic, Apocryphal Daniel literature, Hebrew and Aramaic, the Psalms of Joshua, Mansur, page 203. The noted scholar on the Dead Sea Scrolls, Miller Burroughs, concluded, quote, there is no reason to think that any of these works were venerated as sacred scripture, unquote. This is from Burroughs. I believe it's New Light on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I could be wrong on that, but it's pretty close to what the original title was, page 178. Now, as we pointed out in the program, is essentially what Huff and Meade points out. He's quoting from Burroughs. Burroughs wrote way back when the Dead Sea Scrolls were just starting to be published. There was really no wide scholarship. People couldn't view the scrolls, only a few people could, and they kind of broadcast what they saw, right? So this is Dead Sea Scroll scholarship in its infancy. We're talking minutes after its birth, right? And he used Burroughs a lot in his apologetics, using Dead Sea Scroll evidence against the Catholic canon. And so Burroughs is horribly antiquated. It was cutting edge when it was first published, but within a few years, it was kind of antiquated and superseded. In fact, Burroughs is very clear that a lot of his views were tentative. He was relying on secondhand information because it hadn't been published. He's only hearing about these things from the people that actually have hands-on contact with the scrolls, all that stuff. So that's an example of what Meade and Huff points out. But what Meade and Huff didn't point out, and what I point out in those programs way back in 2012, is that Geisler misquotes and misuses these sources. Okay, if you actually run down the sources like I do on that program and you see it in black and white, what you find out is his apologetics with this, not only here in the encyclopedia, but all of his other works, he misuses the sources. In fact, Miller Barrow's quote here is not about the so-called apocryphal text of Tobit and Sirach that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This concerns pseudepigraphical works, some of which were unknown before the Dead Sea discoveries. And he says there's no reason to believe that any of these were considered sacred. But the way Geisler quotes it, it seems as if Miller Burroughs is actually stating this about the fragments of Tobit and Judith, which he only learned secondhand, in which he says he really can't comment on it. We also looked at his claim that canonical works were written on a special kind of parchment, and it was in a special script that indicates it's canonical. And we went through the sources and we showed that it wasn't really a special parchment. It was more of it was just what do I want to say, vellum. It was animal skins. But that doesn't say much, and I believe the deuterocanonical texts are on parchment and excuse me, on animal skins and parchment. At least Epistle of Jeremiah is on parchment, if I remember correctly. And the special script, it really isn't a script. It was more like column lengths. And what Geisler doesn't point out is earlier in Burroughs' book, he notes that Daniel was not in this special format and therefore may not have been considered canonical. And therefore, maybe that's an argument for late dating of Daniel. Now, again, this is all from memory. I haven't gone over this material for a long, long time. I think since I did the program. But that's kind of a gist of just some of the really bad use of sources that Geisler does. Personally, I think it's dishonest because there's no way he can quote these things devoid of their context, and in a way he does. That's very self-serving. Now, maybe Meade and Huff need a few more years. Maybe we'll see a program from them where they actually go through Norm Geisler's stuff and debunk all the horrible ways he uses these sources. But if they do that, really, they're just duplicating what you've seen here on the Apocrypha Apocalypse. So if you've been a viewer of this channel, a longtime viewer, you're way ahead of the curve on this stuff because we do run sound sources. And we debunk things like Geisler's bizarre claims like he makes here and elsewhere as well. Oh, so anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a nice short video, but I think it's an important one because it's nice to see evangelical apologists like Meade and Huff kind of throwing Geisler into the bus where he deserves to be because of his work in this area of apologetics. Maybe his stuff is better. I haven't read his philosophical things that both Huff and Meade say he's solid on. Hopefully he is. I have no idea. But I know when it comes to his work on the Deuterocanon or the Protestant canon, it's a lot like this. It's terrible. So you don't have to do all this research, guys. All you have to do is support us on the channel. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, like, put some comments on, put down Geisler under the bus in the comments section. Help us explode the algorithm so other people will get this information. And also, by the way, William Albrecht and myself are on Patreon. We appreciate your financial support. It's tough times, with inflation and so on, and it's difficult making ends meet. So I know William and we definitely appreciate your financial support as well as your prayers and your support of the channel. So thank you so much. Until next week, I'm Gary Machuda. Have a great week. Bye-bye.